We are in Proverbs chapter 6. Proverbs chapter 6. Proverbs chapter 6. Now keep in mind, in Proverbs chapter 6, that the first 9 chapters are a father's instruction to his son. So it's what a dad is saying to his son concerning how to live a successful life, how to live a life that is full of wisdom. And so chapter 6 deals with 4 enemies that can destroy a person. 4 enemies that can destroy a person financially, physically, morally, or spiritually. And the first enemy that can destroy a person financially is going into debt. That's the first thing he's going to talk about, going into debt. In verse 1 it says, "My son, if you become surety for your friend, if you have shaken hands in pledge for a stranger, you are snared by the words of your mouth. You are taken by the words of your mouth. So do this, my son, and deliver yourself, for you have come into the hand of your friend. Go and humble yourself. Plead with your friend. Give no sleep to your eyes, nor slumber to your eyelids. Deliver yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter, and like a bird from the hand of the fowler." Now, these enemies are somewhat linked together. And often those that are bound by one are bound by the others. They all go hand in hand. The first is living beyond your means. Living beyond your means. The father advises the son, if you can't afford it, don't use debt to get it. If you can't afford it, don't go into debt to get it. Why? Because the minute you go into debt, you're trapped by that agreement. I think one of the areas we see this probably most common is when you buy a car. Because as soon as you drive the car off the lot, the value of the car is cut in half immediately. And if you were to go back and try to sell that car, you would still be upside down with your loan. So you're bound by your word. You're bound by that agreement that you've made. You've got to live by that agreement. And Solomon captures it or compares it to being trapped by a hunter. It's like being trapped by a hunter. So he says, what do you do if you're in debt? Get out of debt as quickly as possible. If you're in debt, put all your focus into getting out of debt. He says, don't sleep at night. Don't rest. Just do everything you can to get out of debt. And if you're in debt with a friend, go and humble yourself before your friend and ask him to release you from the debt. Hey, I can't pay this back. Would you? I'm going to give this back to you. I know I said I could have, buy this tractor or whatever they bought back then. Maybe it was a new hoe or something, and so hey, here's your hoe back. Can you let me go for my debt? So I don't owe you for this. And so he says, humble yourself before your friend and ask to be released from your debt. And in fact, be so focused on getting out of debt that you don't rest or sleep until you are. The most recent studies that I looked up, and they were as recent as April of 2014, they show that the average credit card debt is $7,000. It's the 3rd largest source of debt in America. Number 1 is, of course, mortgages. Number 2 is college loans. And number 3 is credit card debt. The average American family has $14,000 of debt in general, $14,000 to $15,000. So when you think about the average family, so if you're around that, figure, then you're average. If you're above that, then you're above average, If you're below that, then you're doing great. Just keep going in that direction. And so Solomon says, deliver yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter and like a bird from the hand of a fowler. It's a trap, and you're being trapped by it. Get out from underneath it. The second enemy that can destroy a person is laziness. It says in verse 6, "Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise, which having no captain, overseer, or ruler, provides her supplies in the summer and gathers her food in the harvest. How long will you slumber, O sluggard? When will you rise from your sleep? A little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep, and so shall your poverty come on you like a prowler, and your need like an armed man. So here Solomon warns against self-inflicted poverty. This is self-inflicted poverty. This isn't the kind of poverty that is kind of thrust upon a person, like for instance, when the economic downturn happened and there was a lot of people were wiped out. That's not self-inflicted. This is self-inflicted poverty. And he contrasts two lifestyles, the lazy person and the ant. Those are the two lifestyles he contrasts here. And he says, the ant lacks the sophistication and resources that human beings have, and yet they're able to provide for all their needs. I mean, they don't have a leader, they don't have any organization, yet you see them, they're out there working like crazy. You drop something in your kitchen, like now, we feed our dogs and they eat most of the food, and whatever's left, and within a period of a half an hour, there's an ant trail going outside our house. I don't know how they find it, but they've got this, this sense that they can find any food anywhere in the house, or even upstairs. I'm like, how did you get upstairs into our shower? This is crazy. There's no food in the shower, unless maybe Roxy's thinking in there. But maybe that's where she's got the chocolate hidden, and I just got to follow the ant trail to find it. But what's interesting is he says the lazy man is overtaken by poverty. He doesn't see it coming. The lazy man doesn't see poverty coming. Now, what's interesting is the word that he uses for ant, the word that's translated ant, can also be translated toil or work. It's the same word. So in a way, Solomon uses a little play on words, and he uses a little sarcasm here. And so he says, basically, go to the ant. In other words, go to work, you sluggard. Look at the ant. Be like the ant. Go to work, you sluggard. And he says, learn her ways. She provides for the winter in the summer, meaning she plans ahead. The hardworking person is always planning ahead for what they're going to need before they need it. They're thinking ahead. And you have to plant seed in the summer to get harvest in the fall, right? So you have to plan ahead to have the resources you need in the summer in order to have a crop in the winter. She gathers her food in the fall, meaning she works when it's time to work. In contrast that to the sluggard who's sleeping instead of working. So it's not only planning ahead, but when it's time to work, you work. You work hard when there's work there, and when there's not work there, then you're planning for the next season of harvest. The third enemy are troublemakers. In verse 12 it says, a worthless person, a wicked man, walks with a perverse mouth. He winks with his eyes. He shuffles his feet. He points, in other words, he's quick to move. If you point at him, he's moving out of the way. He's always on the move. He's shifty. He's a shifty fellow. He points with his fingers. The guys that are guilty are never guilty, right? They're always, it's not me, it's him. They're always blaming someone else. They're pointing with their fingers. Perversity is in his heart. He devises evil continually. He sows discord. Therefore his calamity shall come suddenly. Suddenly he shall be broken without remedy. These 6 things the Lord hates, yet 7 are an abomination to him: a proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that are swift in running to evil, a false witness who speaks lies, and one who sows discord among the brethren. So when he uses the word here, worthless, a worthless person, it refers to someone who is of no value because all they're doing is causing trouble, breaking the law, twisting reality, devising evil, sowing discord. They're not bringing value, they're taking away value from a situation. So Solomon says that is a worthless person. They're not bringing value to something. They're taking it away. And, one of the hardest things, if you're a nice person, and generally we're all nice people. We're not jerks, we're not mean people. We like to think the best about people. But if you just look over a person's life, are they bringing value to the situation? Are they taking away value? You know, the worthless person is always taking away value. How do they take away value? They're causing trouble. They're stirring up, discord. They're breaking the law. They're breaking the rules. They're twisting reality. They're not reflecting what's really happening. And Solomon says that calamity will come upon them suddenly without warning. Even if they get along, even if they get, go a long time without having any calamity, it doesn't mean that calamity isn't coming. Sometimes we look at people that are like this and they're like, man, they're doing great. They seem to never have a problem, but there comes a day when that calamity is going to hit, and it hits, boom, instantly, and it kind of takes them down. Then Solomon lists 6 things that God hates and 7 that are an abomination. He says here, a proud look, someone that just has that arrogance about them. A lying tongue, someone that's always lying, not telling the truth. Hands that shed innocent blood. A heart that devises wicked plans. Feet that are swift in running to evil. A liar and one who sows discord among brothers. These are the things that God says, I hate, and they're an abomination to me. What's interesting to me is what's not on the list. And I think what we need to do when we start thinking about things that God actually hates and that are actually an abomination to Him, is we need to go by His list. And these are the things that really bother Him. And these things should bother us. Sometimes, when we see other things, like a heart that devises, or feet that are swift to running to evil, it's like, oh, those are just kids. That's what they do. No, that needs to bother us. That needs to affect us to say, no, that they shouldn't be doing that. We need to correct that. So it's learning to look at things through the eyes of God. And our view of what's important is not the same as God's view, and we would be wise to value what God values. The 4th enemy is sexual immorality. In verse 20 it says, my son, keep your father's command, and do not forsake the law of your mother. Bind them continually upon your heart. Tie them around your neck. When you roam, they will lead you. When you sleep, they will keep you. When you are awake, they will speak with you. For the commandment is a lamp, and the law is a light. Reproofs of instruction are the way of life, to keep you from the evil woman, from the flattering tongue of a seductress. Do not lust after her beauty in your heart, nor let her lure you with her eyelids. For by means, that means, flatters you with her eyelids. Never quite got that one. For by means of a harlot, a man is reduced to a crust of bread, and an adulteress will prey upon his precious life. Can a man take fire to his bosom, and his clothes not be burned? Can one walk on hot clothes, and his coals and his feet not be seared? So is he who goes into his neighbor's wife. Whoever touches her shall not be innocent. People do not despise a thief if he steals to satisfy himself when he is starving. Yet when he is found, he must restore sevenfold. He may have to give up all the substance of his house. Whoever commits adultery with a woman lacks understanding. He who does so destroys his own soul. Wounds and dishonor he will get, and his reproach will not be wiped away. For jealousy is a husband's fury. Therefore he will not spare in the day of vengeance. He will accept no recompense, nor will he be appeased, though you give many gifts. So there's no way to appease that jealous wrath. Now I found it interesting that immorality begins by rejecting the upbringing of your mom and dad, who gave birth to you, nurtured you, raised you, instructed you in the ways of life. It really goes all the way back to them. In order to enter into this lifestyle, you have to reject your upbringing. You have to dishonor your father and your mother. There's a lack of respect. And I see that in our culture today. There's a general lack of respect for parental authority. And that lack of respect is translated into a lack of morality in the youth. A lack of morality in the youth. And we know that in the last days, the Bible says that men will become lovers of self. But the Bible also says in the last days that the hearts of the children the sons will be turned back to the fathers, and the fathers back to the sons. And I think that in order for that, if we want to see morality restored in our country, it's not just getting with the youth and telling them how to be how to abstain from sex. It's getting into the family and rebuilding the trust and the respect for parental authority. Because as that is established, then morality flows from that. Immorality flows from a rejection of parental authority. Secondly, immorality destroys discernment because it confuses right and wrong. He talks about don't believe the flattery. And when immorality destroys your ability to discern what is flattery and what is true, what is exaggerated and what is not. And you no longer can see its color. And third, it says that immorality destroys your soul. It breaks down the psychology of a person through guilt, condemnation, and shame. It wounds, is what it says. It brings a wound, and it brings dishonor, and it destroys self-worth. That's what immorality does to a person. It destroys a person. Now, chapter 7 continues warning of the enemies that destroy the people. In verse 1 it says, "My son, keep my words and treasure my commands within you. Keep my commands and live, and my law as the apple of your eye. Bind them on your fingers and write them on the tablet of your heart." Now, the Jews have taken this and they've made it a literal thing. And so it was interesting as we're on the plane over to Israel, they would start to pray and you would see them, put the little phylacteries on their head, the little box. It looks like the Japanese shoes, with it was wooden shoes with the things, and you walk on them. They kind of look like those, except turned around. You put them on your head and you tie them. And then they would tie something around their wrist all the way up to their elbow, and it was to remind them of the law. It was a reminder of the law. So it's literally here. They're binding them on their fingers, and so it's a representation. Literally, they would do it to remind themselves as they're praying. "Say to wisdom, you are my sister, and call understanding your nearest kin, that they may keep you from the immoral woman, from the seductress who flatters with her words. For at the window of my house I looked through my lattice, and saw among the simple, I perceived among the youths, a young man devoid of understanding, passing along the street near her corner, and he took the path to her house. And in the twilight, in the evening, in the black and dark of night, and there a woman met him with the attire of a harlot and a crafty heart." You notice it's always in the black and the dark of night. It's always in the evening. That's why when you go into a nightclub, the lights are all low, everything's pointed really dark, It's because everybody looks great when it's candlelight and when it's dark. But when you turn the lights on, it's like, ooh, it's scary. So they do that. They don't want to scare people away. So that it's always at dark. She cries out at the gates, at the entry of the city. I'm in a different place. See, it gets y'all confused. Says, and there a woman met him with the attire of a harlot and a crafty heart. She was loud and rebellious. Her feet would not stay at home. Now, I don't know why it is that when guys enter into affairs that they think that everyone's going to stay quiet about it. No one ever stays quiet about it. It always ends up in the news, right? I mean, we started all the way back with the presidential campaign with Obama, and all the guys systematically got wiped out, not because of their policies, but because of their lifestyle. You know, even the Christian candidates got disqualified because somewhere in their past, someone came up and said he was not faithful to his wife, and it took him out. These, you know, the adulteress, when you enter into an adulterous affair, it's always loud. Someone's always loud and rebellious. They're not playing by the rules, because if they were, they wouldn't be in an affair to begin with. You know, someone's going to find out about it. At times she was outside, at times in the open square, lurking at every corner. So she caught him and kissed him with an impudent face. She said to him, I have peace offerings with me. Today I have paid my vows. Look, I even went to church. So I came out to meet you diligently to seek your face, and I have found you. I have spread my bed with tapestry, colored coverings of Egyptian linen. I have perfumed my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. Come, let us take our fill of love until morning. Let us delight ourselves with love. It's all about love. We're just loving each other. For my husband is not at home. He has gone on a long journey. He has taken a bag of money with him and will come home on the appointed day. And with her enticing speech, she caused him to yield. With her flattering lips, she seduced him. And immediately he went after her as an ox goes to the slaughter, or as a fool to the correction of the stocks. Till an arrow struck his liver, speaking of a disease, a communicable disease. As a bird hastens to the snare, he did not know it would cost his life. Now therefore listen to me, my children. Pay attention to the words of my mouth. Do not let your heart turn aside to her ways. Do not stray into her paths, for she has cast down many wounded, and all who were slain by her were strong men. Her house is the way to hell, descending to the chambers of death. And so he's speaking about women who use sex for financial gain, and these women bring death. They can end careers, they can end marriages, families. They feed on the loneliness, the boredom, the lust, the insecurity of their customers. And Solomon says that her house is the way to hell. And that's where it leads. And it's surprising to me how many men, even to this day, think, I can get away with this. I can do this and no one will know. I can do this and not be found out. And yet it always comes to the surface. Chapter 8, wisdom cries aloud. In verse 1 it says, does not wisdom cry out and understanding lift up her voice? She takes her stand on the top of the high hill, beside the way where the paths meet. She cries out by the gates, at the entry of the city, at the entrance of the doors. To you, O men, I call, and my voice is to the sons of men. O you simple ones, understand prudence, and you fools, be of an understanding heart. Listen, for I will speak of excellent things, and from the opening of my lips will come right things. For my mouth will speak truth. Wickedness is an abomination to my lips. All the words of my mouth are with righteousness. Nothing crooked or perverse is in them. They are all plain to him who understands, and right to those who find knowledge. Receive my instruction, and not silver, and knowledge rather than choice gold. For wisdom is better than rubies, and all the things one may desire cannot be compared with them. And so wisdom is crying out in 6 distinct areas. First, it's mentioned on the top of the high hill. Now, the highest place in the city was generally where the king lived. You know, it was where the rulers lived. So it's on the top of the high hill, right at the very heart of the leadership of the city, that wisdom leads the city. You know, wisdom is leading the city. And then he says here, beside the way, the place where people walk and live their everyday life. Wisdom is there in the midst of everyday life and leading in everyday life. And it talks about where the paths meet, you know, the place where decisions are made. Wisdom is there in the place where decisions are being made. It's by the gates where people enter into the city. You know, it was there at the entrance of the city where the king would sit, and they would basically hold court. So, for instance, when we were at Tel Dan, you would walk into the main entrance of the city, and you would go through the gates, and then as you would get into the gates, there was a seat where the king would sit, his throne was there, and there would be, witnesses, and they would sit, and people would come and bring their case, for the king to judge. And they would ask advice and it was there at the gates, at this entrance of the city, where the men of the city would gather, and they would discuss the issues of the city. These are the things we're dealing with. And they would conduct business matters, and business deals were struck there at the entrance of the city. So it's right here in the middle of commerce that wisdom is found. At the entrance of the door, speaking of the door of every house. So it's right where every person lives, that's where wisdom is also found. In verse 12 it says, I, wisdom, dwell with prudence, and find out knowledge and discretion. The fear of the Lord is to hate evil. Pride and arrogance and the evil way and the perverse mouth I hate. Counsel is mine and sound wisdom. I am understanding, I have strength. By me the kings reign and rulers decree justice. By me princes rule and nobles, all the judges of the earth. And so here we see the value of wisdom in 4 specific areas. First of all, in civil order. He says, by wisdom kings reign, and by wisdom lawmakers enforce judgment. By wisdom princes and nobles rule. So it brings value to civil order. What also does wisdom bring? Counsel, also translated plan. So when he talks about here, he says, counsel is mine. He's talking about a plan. Wisdom has a plan. Wisdom thinks about the future. Wisdom is always thinking ahead. It's always planning. It's putting those kinds of things in motion. Sound wisdom, also translated sound judgment, here where it says wisdom is mine and sound wisdom, it can also be translated sound judgment. Wisdom knows how to succeed, in other words. Sound judgment refers to what do you do in order to succeed in a situation. Wisdom knows how to gain that success. And, we're not talking about necessarily financial success, but any kind of, how are you going to navigate through a circumstance and succeed in that circumstance? Wisdom will teach you how to do that. He says here, talks about I am understanding and I have strength. Understanding or knowledge with experience. Wisdom understands what needs to be done and how to do it. And strength not only refers to force of power, but the sense of awe ascribed to the one possessing this power. So when you see a person who has a lot of wisdom, they kind of put off this sense about them where, not only are they getting things done, but they carry themselves in a way that you go, that guy has wisdom. There's wisdom behind his decision. It brings a sense of confidence that things are going to happen. That this person knows what to do. I'm going to go talk to that person. And we all know people like that, right? When we're dealing with certain different situations, like, I'm going to talk to that guy because he knows. He knows what I need to know. He knows what's going on. The second area that wisdom helps is in material blessing. In verse 17 it says, I love those who love me, and those who seek me diligently will find me. Riches and honor are with me, enduring riches and righteousness. My fruit is better than gold, yes, than fine gold, and my revenue than choice silver. I traverse the way of righteousness in the midst of the gates of justice, that I may cause those who love me to inherit wealth, that I may fill their treasury. So wisdom brings material blessing, riches and honor, enduring riches and righteousness. If you remember, Solomon was the wisest man in the world, but he was also the most wealthy man in the world. His wisdom brought wealth. The wealth didn't make him wise, but the wisdom brought wealth. It went the other way around. Now, was Solomon looking for the wealth? No, he was just looking for wisdom. So if you're pursuing wealth, you've got it mixed up. You pursue wisdom, and wisdom brings blessing. Riches and honor speak of financial wealth, but it also speaks of social dignity. Wisdom not only brings wealth, but with it brings a sense of stature within the community. Enduring riches and righteousness speak of generational wealth, but also influence and social transformation. So God not only wants to bless us financially, but He wants to, He doesn't want to just give us nicer houses or nicer clothes or nicer cars, but God wants to bless us so that we can influence culture and future generations. You see, wisdom, that's what wisdom brings. It brings that blessing that not only blesses us, but it blesses those around us, and it transforms culture and brings an enduring blessing, something that will be passed on from generation to generation to generation. The third area that wisdom, we see the value of wisdom, is in the area of creation. Verse 22, it says, "The Lord possessed me at the beginning of His way, before His works of old. I have been established from everlasting, from the beginning, before there ever was an earth. When there was no depth, I was brought forth. When there was no fountains abounding with water, before the mountains were settled, before the hills, I was brought forth. While as yet He had not made the earth or the fields or the primal dust of the world. When He had prepared the heavens, I was there. When He drew a circle on the face of the deep." I wonder if that's how He formed the earth. He just drew a circle on the face of the deep, and boom, there's the world. When He drew a circle on the face of the deep. When He established the clouds above, when He strengthened the fountains of the deep, when He assigned to the sea its limits, so that the waters would not transgress His command, when He marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was beside Him as a master craftsman, and I was daily His delight, rejoicing always before Him, rejoicing in His inhabited world, and my delight was with the sons of men. The wisdom that God gives to us is the same wisdom that He used to create the world. Now Solomon was not only a man of just wisdom in terms of spiritual wisdom, but he was a scientist. I mean, he was very knowledgeable. He knew about geology, he knew about botany, he knew about bugs, he knew about a lot of stuff. And here he's kind of bringing all of that scientific knowledge and he's applying it to creation. He was the smartest guy on the planet of that time. He was a genius par excellence. And he was fascinated by creation. He was fascinated by all the things that God created. And he said, and he basically realized, man, if God used this wisdom to establish the boundaries of the ocean, that God used this wisdom to mark out the foundations of the earth. How did He hang the world into space? That wisdom that God had, He used to do that. He used wisdom to divide the heavens and the earth. He used wisdom to form the clouds, to form the world out of this primal dust. That this is the same wisdom that God offers to us. You see. That's what sets biblical wisdom apart from all other wisdom. Because our wisdom is not just built on human experience. It's built on God's experience. God, the one who created the heavens and the earth, the things that were here before we got here. That's the wisdom we get to tap into. The fourth area where we see the value of wisdom is in favor with God. Verse 32 says, "Now therefore listen to me, my children, for blessed are those who keep my way. Hear my instruction and be wise, and do not disdain it. Blessed is the man who listens to me, watching daily at my gates, waiting at the posts of my doors. For whoever finds me finds life and obtains favor from the Lord. But he who sins against me wrongs his own soul. All those who hate me love death." Basically, wisdom is not hard to find. That's what Solomon is saying. You have to walk past it to get out the door of your house. It's at the doorpost of your house. So you have to literally walk past wisdom to get out of your house. You have to face wisdom daily when you're on the work, on the job site, because wisdom is right there in the midst of all of your working. So it takes a lot not to hear wisdom. In order to not hear wisdom, you have to ignore it. That's what disdain means. It means to ignore. So wisdom is crying aloud. It's in the streets. It's at the decision point. It's in the marketplace. It's at your door. It's in your family. It's where the men of the city are meeting, and conducting business. It's in all of these places. So for you not to hear wisdom, you have to literally ignore it. You have to disdain it. And he says here, do not disdain it. Do not ignore it. When we do experience this wisdom, we experience happiness and the Lord's favor. But he who sins against wisdom, it says, wrongs his own soul. Now the word sin speaks of committing an infraction or breaking the law. And it implies that the idea of a consequence. So wisdom says, do this, and you don't do what wisdom says, you're committing an infraction that has a consequence. You're breaking a law, in a sense. It's the same kind of an idea. So when we don't follow the way of wisdom, we do violence to our own souls. We're hurting ourselves. We're wounding ourselves. We're affecting ourselves psychologically. It's a self-inflicted wound. And Solomon equates ignoring wisdom with having a death wish. It's like someone that has a death wish. It's a decision that brings harm to yourself. And we all know situations that are like that. If we would think ahead, if we would be careful, if we would consider the wise way, how much could we avoid in our lives? How much trouble could we avoid? Usually what happens to me is when I ignore things. I shouldn't ignore my wife. That's not wise. But when I ignore my wife, I have a problem. It causes a problem down the road. Usually doesn't come right away. It comes suddenly without warning. But it's not really without warning because I've ignored wisdom, right? I'm hurting myself. And there's areas in my life where I can hurt myself by ignoring what wisdom is calling out to me. Now in chapter 9, Solomon brings his son to a decision. It's either wisdom or folly. You have to decide. In verse 1, wisdom has built her house. She has hewn out her 7 pillars. She has slaughtered her meat. She has mixed her wine. She has also furnished her table. She has sent out her maidens. She cries out from the highest places of the city. Whoever is simple, let him turn in here. As for him who lacks understanding, she says to him, come, eat of my bread and drink of my wine that I have mixed. Forsake foolishness and live, and go in the way of understanding. He who corrects a scoffer gets shame for herself, and he who rebukes a wicked man only harms himself. Do not correct the scoffer, lest he hate you. Rebuke a wise man, and he will love you. Give instruction to wise men, and he will still be wiser. Teach a just man, and he will increase in learning. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. For by me your days will be multiplied, and years of life will be added to you. If you are wise, and you are wise for yourself, and if you scoff, you will bear it alone. So, if you're wise, basically, it's going to bless you. But if you scoff, you're kind of on your own. You're going to bear it. You're going to bear that on your own. Now, verse 1 says that wisdom has built her house, and she has hewn out her 7 pillars. And it's from this passage we get that phrase, the 7 pillars of wisdom, or the house that wisdom builds, and people kind of get this from this verse. Now 7 is a significant number in biblical numerology. It's the number of completeness or the number of perfection. And so Solomon could be referring to the completeness of wisdom. He's talking here about the totality of wisdom. The 7 pillars of wisdom representing the totality of wisdom. Or it can also be referring to the world that wisdom builds, that perfect world, that complete world that wisdom builds, the house, that wisdom builds is perfect and complete. In verses 2 through 6, wisdom is compared to a royal banquet. Meat and wine represent the good teaching of wisdom. And it's available to all who want to come and dine. The invitation for all those who want to live. Forsake foolishness and live. So if you want to live, come and learn of, the way of wisdom. In verses 7 and 8, instruction is given concerning those who mock wisdom. And basically what Solomon says is, don't correct someone who mocks wisdom. Because they will turn it on you and try to shame you. When you have someone that's constantly mocking wisdom and you try to give them wisdom, they're not going to receive it from you. They're actually going to flip it on you, and they're going to try to trip you up with your own words. So he says, don't offer it to them. You'll be the one who gets hurt, and in the end, they will hate you. And I have to say, that's probably been one of my greatest downfalls, is trying to give wisdom to people who didn't want wisdom. Trying to give wisdom to people who are mocking that wisdom. And you would advise them, and all they would do is they would say, you're just so negative. You just have something negative to say all the time, and they would turn it on me. And they would make me out to be the bad guy when I'm trying to give them wisdom. So if you have someone that mocks wisdom, he says, don't even give it to them. But the ones that are looking for wisdom, how can you tell? Well, the wise man becomes wiser. When you give wisdom to a wise man, it makes them wiser. If you give wisdom to a just man, then they increase in learning. They're hungry to learn. They want to know. Their days will be multiplied and their life extended. And so that's the kind of person you want to pour into. The person that's hungry, that wants to learn, that really wants wisdom. You pour into that person, and they're going to blossom. They're going to flourish under that wisdom. Now you contrast this to the way of the fool. In verse 13 it says, a foolish woman is clamorous. In other words, they make a lot of noise. She's simple and knows nothing. For she sits at the door of her house, on a seat by the highest places of the city. She's everywhere. To call to those who pass by, who go straight on their way. Whoever is simple, let him turn in here. And as for him who lacks understanding, she says to him, stolen water is sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. But he does not know that the dead are there, that her guests are in the depths of hell. And so in the same way, the voice of the fool is in the same places as the voice of wisdom. But they sound different. Wisdom is calling aloud, but the voice of the fool is clamorous, just making a bunch of noise. It's just calling attention to itself, but has nothing to say. People like that? They always want to call attention to themselves. They're the loudest ones, but they really have nothing to say. When you give them the floor, they really have nothing of importance. Foolishness also invites those who are passing by to come and eat. But when they come in, instead of offering them meat and wine like wisdom does, foolishness offers them stolen water and bread. It's appealing, and it claims that it tastes sweeter. Hey, here's stolen water and bread, and it tastes sweeter than the meat and the wine. Why? Because we got it illegally. It's the lure of something that's a little bit on the edge. It's a little bit illegal. We shouldn't be doing this. It makes it more appealing. it appeals to the basic instinct of man. You know, it appeals to the simple-minded, those that are after the thrill. But there's no real content. There's nothing really satisfying. And it leads to death. And it says here that her guests are in the depths of hell. Now that's the first 9 chapters. And that really kind of concludes the instructions from the Father to the Son. And now we come to the second section of the Proverbs that will take us to the end of Proverbs. And so beginning with chapter 10, we move into the first collection of Solomon's Proverbs. And the basic theme of all the Proverbs is to choose wisdom and avoid foolishness. And these are reinforced through short sayings that present both the positive side of wisdom and the negative side of foolishness. And so it's the Jewish belief, that you provide both sides, and in the middle is the truth. So that's kind of the idea. You have two opposing sides, and you find wisdom in the midst of those two opposing sides. So in verse 1 it says, "The Proverbs of Solomon, a wise son makes a glad father, but a foolish son is the grief of his mother. Treasures of wickedness profit nothing, but righteousness delivers from death. The Lord will not allow the righteous soul to famish, but he casts away the desire of the wicked." Riches that are wrongly secured do not satisfy. And often dishonest men die before their time, but righteous men will live forever. It's a matter of perspective. And so Solomon begins right away by giving the son a perspective. The treasures of the wickedness, they don't profit anything. And so you have money in your bank account, but you don't have peace in your home. You don't have peace in your life. Contrast that to the righteousness but righteousness delivers from death. Hey, I have security. I have peace. I can walk out of my house and I'm not going to get hit in a drive-by. I'm not going to die. It was interesting. I was talking to some people who were ministering up in Watts, and they were telling me that one of their ministries is they go into into some of the areas with SUVs that have tinted windows, and they collect gang members, and they bring them in these SUVs with tinted windows, and they take them to the beach. The reason why they do that is because if they are seen leaving their territory, they will be killed. They can't even, a lot of times these gangs might own a block area within the city. And if they go out of their territory, then they're encroaching on someone else's territory, and they start a war. So, and a lot of these kids have never seen the beach. They've never left that 1 block or 2 block area of their home for fear of being killed. So it's a ministry that they go in and they pull these kids out, they take them to the beach, and they minister Jesus to them, and they give them a bigger vision for their life. But they have to do it in this secret way because they're afraid of losing their life. But righteousness, you don't have to worry about that. Walking in righteousness, you don't have to worry about it. No one's going to hurt you. In verse 4, "He who has a slack hand becomes poor, but the hand of the diligent makes rich. He who gathers in summer is a wise son. He who sleeps at harvest is a son who causes shame." Now, the principle of sowing is interesting because I was talking to some of my farmer friends in the Midwest, and they plant feed corn is what they plant. They have acres and acres. It's kind of the largest producer of feed corn in Minnesota, Terwisha Farm. And it's interesting because they say you plant one seed into the ground, but you get exponentially more seed back in harvest. So it's not a 1-to-1 ratio. You don't plant one seed and get one seed back. You plant one seed and get hundreds of seeds back through the plant. It's an exponential thing. And so this principle of sowing and reaping is that you always reap more than you sow. But if you don't sow anything, you won't reap anything. It's a simple principle. You're going to reap more than you sow, exponentially more, but you have to sow something. Something's got to go into the ground. And if you don't, the one who gathers in summer, prepares the resources for the future crops, is a wise son. So sowing also implies forethought. So you can't make a last minute decision. You can't show up the day before you got to harvest and go, oh my goodness, I got to plant corn. You have to plan it ahead of time. So it implies forethought. Last minute decisions, lack of planning. In our culture today, in some places, has come to equate being led by the Spirit. If I'm last minute, if I'm unprepared, then I'm led by the Spirit. And according to Solomon, no, you're not led by the Spirit, you're foolish. You're not going the way of wisdom. Really, you're showing a lack of concern or a lack of love for people, because ultimately, that lack of wisdom, that lack of planning, shows that you really don't care the people that you're caring for. It shows that all you're thinking about is yourself. But that forethought means, no, I love these people. I want to plan for them. I'm planning for my family. I'm planning to take care, and I'm going to sow ahead of time so that I can reap a harvest in the future in order to take care of those around me. In verse 6, it says, blessings are on the head of the righteous, but violence covers the mouth of the wicked. The memory of the righteous is blessed, but the name of the wicked will rot. The wise in heart will receive commands, but a prating fool will fall. It's always interesting to me when I have someone who doesn't know how to do something, and then you start to instruct them, and then they have an opinion about it. You ever had that? You would say, okay, I'm going to do this. Okay, that's great. This is how you do it. Well, I don't agree with that. This is how. And have you ever done this before? No, I've never done this before. Then you don't have anything to say. You're in the learning position, And it's and same thing with me. When I'm learning how to do something, I need to take that instruction. It says here, the wise heart will receive commands. I need to take that instruction. In verse 9 here, he who walks with integrity walks securely, but he who perverts his ways will become known. He who winks with the eye causes trouble, but a prating fool will fall. When you're a winker, so beware the winkers. That guy that's hey, let's go do this. But they don't really mean that. That's what they mean. Beware the winker. The mouth of the righteous is a well of life, but violence covers the mouth of the wicked. Hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all sins. Wisdom is found on the lips of him who has understanding, but a rod is for the back of him who is devoid of understanding. Wise people store up knowledge, but the mouth of the foolish is near destruction. The rich man's wealth is his strong city. The destruction of the poor is their poverty. The labor of the righteous leads to life, the wages of the wicked to sin. And he who keeps instruction is in the way of life, but he who refuses correction goes astray. None of us love to be corrected. I need to be corrected. I don't love to be corrected. But the reality of it is that by receiving that instruction, it keeps me on the right path. Whereas he says here that the one who refuses correction goes astray. Even if it's just a little bit. And I've watched this happen in people's lives. Don't do this. And they, well, I'm okay, I know what I'm doing. And they start to veer off just a little bit. And, and maybe it doesn't seem like a big deal at that time, but then you see them 6 months down the road and they're way off. Because that little veering off just takes them way out in, where they shouldn't be. And so, I don't love correction, but I need correction, and I welcome correction, because it keeps me on the path of life. Whoever hides hatred has lying lips, and whoever spreads slander is a fool. In the multitude of words, sin is not lacking. But he who restrains his lips is wise. The tongue of the righteous is choice silver. The heart of the wicked is worth little. The lips of the righteous feed many, but fools die for lack of wisdom. The blessing of the Lord makes one rich, and he adds no sorrow with it. To do evil is like sport of a fool, but a man of understanding has wisdom. The fear of the wicked will come upon him, and the desire of the righteous will be granted. When the whirlwind passes by, the wicked is no more, but the righteous has an everlasting foundation. In other words, they have that, their houses are going to be blown away because it's on a good foundation. We see that in the Midwest. As vinegar to the teeth and smoke to the eyes, so is the lazy man to those who send him. What does smoke do to your eyes? It just makes them tear up, right? So you got a lazy guy that's working for you in your company, he just causes you grief, What does vinegar do to your teeth? It eats away your enamel. What happens when you have no enamel? You get cavities, right? And it causes your teeth to rot in your mouth and causes you pain. What does a lazy person do in your company? It slowly over time begins to create an abscess in your company that causes you pain. That's what he's saying. It causes you pain. The lips of the righteous feed many, but fools die for lack of wisdom. The blessing of the Lord makes one rich, and he adds no sorrow with it. To do evil is like sport to a fool. It's fun. Hey, let's go do this. It's a lot of fun. I remember we used to, when we lived we almost got kicked out of Japan because for fun, I just thought it was fun. We found some spray paint, and if you sprayed it on the wall, and then you can make words, and then light it on fire, and you could watch your words, right? So it was great when you were doing it outside on the seawall, but we decided to do it one time inside a bathroom, so we're putting we're painting the the mirrors with letters, and the urinals had letters in it. We lit them all on fire. We're just kind of enjoying our handiwork, and then we heard the sound of a gun cocking back, and with a bullet getting put in the chamber, and we were yelled at, and they told us to freeze, which we did. And then we were stupid. We tried to escape, which you should never do with the military police. And so we tried to escape. We were just really foolish. And needless to say, my dad got called in to the commander of the base, and we were nearly kicked out of Japan. But they had mercy on us, and I think I'd just come to Christ, but I was still not fully there yet. Anyhow, a man of understanding has wisdom, but to do evil is like sport to a fool. That was fun to me. Fear of the wicked will come upon him, and the desire of the righteous will be granted. When the whirlwind passes by, the wicked is no more. The righteous has an everlasting foundation. As vinegar to the teeth, smoke to the eyes, so is the lazy man to those who send him. The fear of the Lord prolongs days, but the years of the wicked will be shortened. The hope of the righteous will be gladness, but the expectation of the wicked will perish. In other words, they'll lose hope. The way of the Lord is strength for the upright, but destruction will come to the workers of iniquity. The righteous will never be removed, but the wicked will not inhabit the earth. The mouth of the righteous brings forth wisdom, but the perverse tongue will be cut out. The lips of the righteous know what is acceptable, but the mouth of the wicked what is perverse. And so here we see Solomon just contrasting between what's about wisdom and foolish living, and the idea is choose the wise way. Choose the way of wisdom. Because the benefits to us are so incredible. And basically, when we look at the world today, it's hard, especially when we talk to you, when they see that it's the unwise that are making it. It's the unwise that are being promoted. It's the unwise that are, getting accelerated, It's the guy, the unwise person that brings in the bong full of pot and he becomes everybody's buddy. But the guy that's holding out for righteousness, everybody labels him as the bad guy. No one wants to hang out with you. We want to hang out with the guy that's bringing the unwise way. And Solomon is just bringing the perspective of wisdom, which is a grander perspective. It's a greater perspective. Maybe that happens today, but in the long run, they lose. In the long run, judgment comes. In the long run, they lose everything. But the righteous, they win. The blessing of God is on their life. The favor of God is on their life. And the result of walking in wisdom is your life will be blessed. You'll know what's acceptable. And what's interesting to me is that all of these other folks that I would see in business that would seem to accelerate, when life started to fall apart, who did they turn to? Their buddies? No. They know their buddies are messed up. They're not going to go to their buddies to ask for help. They went to the righteous. They went to other Christians, the people that they were mocking, the people that they didn't want to have anything to do with. When their life started to fall apart, they went to them and said, I need help. Would you pray for me? They'd come into my office. And would you spend time and help me sort out this thing? So in the end, the way of wisdom always wins. It's the way that always lasts. And so as we go through that, it'll become more and more apparent with each chapter. Father, we thank you for your word, and Lord, that you would teach us the way of wisdom. That we would learn from you. Lord, that you who created the heavens and the earth, Lord, your experience, your knowledge, your understanding is far superior, far more vast than ours will ever be. And so just the fact that you will impart wisdom to us who ask of you, and even more so because we're your children, is just so mind-blowing. And Lord, that we would take advantage of that. This is our unfair advantage in the world, Lord, that we have the wisdom of God at our disposal. And Lord, that we would learn to seek your wisdom, that we would learn to call upon your wisdom, to learn from you, to hear from you before we act. And that we would walk in the way of wisdom. And Lord, that as a result we would see blessing come upon our lives simply because your ways bring blessing upon our lives. We thank you and we bless you in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. All right. Any questions?
On Proverbs 6 in the beginning, verse 1, if you become surety for your friend, I always thought that was like being like a co-signer, like you're promising, you're making a promising to pay for your friend.
Like a guaranteer.
Yeah. Or so it's not. It could be either or.
I could see that working. It's just in any way that you're encumbering yourself to debt. It could work that way too. But the idea is that whenever you indebt yourself, you are trapped by that debt. You're trapped by that agreement. And so, when I buy something with a credit card, I'm indebting myself to a stranger. So I'm not. It's not. They don't know.